10. Daleks don't like finger biscuits. A cry of rage echoes through the portals of the watchtower. Strings of slimy gossamer sing as the shriek plucks at them. Here, where all the time threads of the city are woven in a plexus, it feels the disturbance, a tremor on the strings of its mind, like the spinning dance of a fly trapped in a web. A missing heartbeat, a lost rattle, the pattern of time that it plans is disrupted, a stormquake, a dark apparition. The steady, seeping drip of the natural flow suddenly trickles into an alternative course. Hatred, like needles, goads the desires and urges that pass for its thoughts. There is only here and now, but its future must be secure. Vale Faisal, its long-term emissary, is no longer in need. 144 other eyes search the arteries of its world, seek out the disruption, smash the alternative, just as it destroyed the Doctor long ago, in the beginning, when it is the process that creates the world. Ace was less surprised by the look she got, more by the length of time it lasted. "Dear gods," was all one of them, the older woman, could manage. They stared at her in apparent disbelief. The heavy man, Ryogus, slid sideways towards the other younger woman and fumbled to take her hand like a frightened child seeking reassurance from its mother. "Jess Pearl," he said. She was even taller than he was, with a kind but careworn face. But then both the women were taller than the men. "Go on then," thought Ace. "This is it. The Doctor always catches them on the hop. Don't give them a chance to think." "Hello, I'm Ace," she said with a forced grin, and nearly added, "and this is the Doctor," but stopped herself just in time. Silence. Close to, they were weirder than she had imagined. Each of them caught in the half-shadows cast by the candle flame. They couldn't have been born into poverty. Their accents had given that away. So their general squalor had been descended into as if they had given up bothering. Their long hair fell past their shoulders in greasy filaments. Their faces were thin and drawn with sallow skin, but there were no traces of beards on the men. The greatcoats and overalls they wore were torn and filthy, yet a pile of other clothes, evidently second-hand, lay neglected beside them. All around was the collection of dusty relics and antiques that made the place resemble a long-lost car boot sale. "Well, say something," said Ace, and she suddenly felt a renewed need to have a long bath. Shonzi, his face tight with restrained emotion, moved in beside Ace. "You could have waited," he muttered and turned back to the others. "All right, Grumblies," he announced with a flourish. "This is Ace. Remember?" It was as if he was turning a knife. "This is why we should be celebrating." "Why is she here?" Peccary's voice was dulled with shock. He pulled the loose hair down over one side of his face. "Why has she come back?" "Because something's happening, you stuffy old goiks," sneered Shonzi. "Something new. Come on, wake up, grannies. Throw away your sticks. Things are changing at last." "No," intoned Peccary. Fear was taking over from shock, but nothing overlaid his general air of weariness. He turned to the old woman. "It's the same thing, Amnoni. It's come back to us again." Amnoni stepped closer to Ace, staring at her as if she were a laboratory specimen. Despite her filthy appearance, the woman maintained a dignity that suggested rank. "We should never have gone to that section. I said that. I knew we would disturb things. First the apparition, now this." "Yeah, punch me and I squeak," snapped Ace. "Since you all know about the Doctor, you'd better tell me where he is, all right? I'm a friend of his." "It's the same," despaired Peccary. "Just as before." He turned away, shaking his head. "What are they on about?" said Ace to Shonzi. "It's not true, what they said in the story." Shonzi shrugged. "If that's what they say happened. I was too young to understand properly." "What do you mean, too young? How long ago was it?" "How long?" interrupted Amnoni, puzzled. "Does she mean how far?" "It was in the beginning," said Peccary, turning back to Ace. "On the first phase, when Shonzi was still a youngster." "Daft goik, I'm not that old," snapped Shonzi. Ace felt something like emotional vertigo. Time storms and time worms, always time playing its tricks on her. How long? 5 years? 10? How long had she been tombed up in those rocks? How old was she now? She didn't dare look in a mirror. What about the doctor? Where's he gone? I want to know what happened. The other two figures, Ryogus and Chesspearl, still clung nervously to each other, watching Ace without a word. Peccary sighed. We knew this would happen. You warned us that you would return. What? I've never seen you before in my life, exploded Ace. I just want to find the doctor. Shonzi touched her arm gently. Did you listen to the story or what? How should I know what it means? He looked angry. You must know. You said it wasn't true. She grasped at what he meant. That's right. The doctor wouldn't attack you. You got it wrong. Yes? Only Shonzi encouraged her. The rest of the audience viewed her with cold impassivity. I saw you. I remember. Just as the TARDIS exploded, I saw you. It was your ship, sliding through the walls like ghosts. And you saw us too. You must have done. The ships must have crashed. You see, exclaimed Shonzi. Ace has the answers. She can help us break out of this. Peccary and Amnoni exchanged glances. It wasn't deliberate, Ace added. Tell us where the doctor hid the future, said Amnoni. Ace wondered why she wasn't fazed by this question, but then anything was possible with the doctor. He was capable of losing things often enough. His keys, his memory, and his temper. Why shouldn't he hide things as well, even impossible things like the future? Why should I tell you? She said. Ryogus suddenly lurched out of his position towards her. His every gesture seemed to burst with energy. Ace thought he would crush her in his bare hands. Because the process has driven us without mercy to find it. All this time working like slaves because of you. Ryogus Talim, asserted Peccary. For a moment the hair fell away from his face. Ace saw the red wheal on his cheek and an eye like a blank white marble in its socket. Ryogus drew grudgingly back. I'll make her tell us, he said. Ace couldn't help laughing. Tell you how to find the future? You're all flutters. You're crazy, she scorned. And whatever you say about the doctor, it isn't true. All I care about is finding him. Even if it's 10 years since you saw him, he can't have gone far. He must still be on this stupid planet. He can't leave without the TARDIS. None of us can leave, said Amnoni. Ace turned to Shonzi. Where do I start looking? You'd better tell me about this process thing. Do I go and talk to that? Going out there alone is stupid, he said. Too dangerous. And we need you here. There are so many questions to answer. What's the point when they don't believe me anyway? I do. And they will. Trust me, Ace. Just one question. Ace sighed. If it means that much to you... Yes, it does. If nothing else, he was persistent. But she wasn't going to let him have it all his own way. Only if I get another of those biscuit things, she said. The group glanced at each other. Hospitality, said Peccary, and nodded. Thanks, said Ace, and managed to palm too. Shonzi looked at her with an intensity that said, Get this right, Ace, or we've both had it. She almost felt she liked him, apart from his stupid hat. Go on then, she said. In the story he told, the captain said we came from another world before we were wrecked on this one. Yeah, she guessed what was coming. She glanced at the others and saw how they stared at Shonzi with an affection that was almost parental. Somehow everything they were depended on this one question. There was a hint of irritation in his voice. They cannot remember what that world is called. She took it as calmly as she could and tried to think it through. You're time travellers, yeah? Shonzi nodded. They think we might have been. Ace thumbed through her brain, trying to avoid the obvious answer. Don't ask me, she thought. I'm just boring old Dorothy from Perivale. What do I know about it? Their eyes were grilling her alive. No, you're not. You're Ace, and you know the answer. The only other solution she could think of was impossible. Daleks didn't and never, ever had eaten crunchy brown finger biscuits. It's Gallifrey, she said. There was something like a deep sigh. Amnoni lowered her eyes, while Peccary stood frozen and unmoving. Ryogus turned his heavy frame away, his shoulders visibly shaking. It's true, he was saying, his voice filling with tears. Gallifrey, how did we forget? Chesspearl embraced tightly, and she was weeping too. There was a gentle repeated murmur, Gallifrey, 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 as they committed the long-lost name of their home planet to memory. Each in turn stepped forward and touched Ace's head as if in wonder. "Well done, Ace," whispered Shonzi. "Surely you'll stay now." She kept quiet as they stood and watched the others intoning their new litany. "So you're all Time Lords," she said awkwardly. "Just like the Doctor." The chant stopped. "Time Lords?" said Captain Peccary. "Who are they?" Amnoni turned suddenly and stared into the darkness of the cluttered hall. "Guards! They found us!" There was a distant chittering from outside. Crash! Something boomed against a door like a battering ram. "Get out, Shonzi!" hissed Peccary. "They're after her!" "They don't even know she's here!" retaliated Shonzi. He pulled Ace towards the window. "Come on! Out the way we came!" "No!" insisted Ryogus and grabbed at Ace's arm. "Get off me, musclehead!" she shouted. Crash! Wood was beginning to splinter. Shonzi scrambled to free Ace. "Not again, Ryogus! Didn't you learn that last time?" Chespearl darted between them, pushing them apart. "No, Ryogus! They must go! Please let them go!" Ace pulled free. "Why did she tell us?" Ryogus kept repeating as Shonzi helped Ace up towards the porthole window. "It should have stayed forgotten." Ace clung to the ledge and looked out into the alley below. "OK, all clear." She heard Captain Peccary say, "Go on, Shonzi, I'll hold them off," before she slipped out and dropped clumsily to the dusty ground. As Shonzi slid down behind her, they heard a final crash from inside. "Which way?" she said. "Wait." There were shouts from inside and Chespearl screamed. Then came the crack of a whip and silence. "That's why you don't want to speak to the process," hissed Shonzi. "This way!" He took her hand and they ran along the alley into the depths of the city. Vale watched them from the columned gallery above. The appearance of the strange girl frightened him. He had seen her once before, in a half-remembered nightmare, her face leaning in over him upside down like an examining doctor, her head framed by a lattice of iron bars. "So that's the dream," he muttered aloud. But it wasn't quite right. The vision remained an enigma, like the prophecies in the Pythian book of future legends at home on Gallifrey, and every so often one was fulfilled, and there was great rejoicing amongst the idiot populace who didn't recognise clever politics when it hit them in the face. He still remembered home, even if the others had forgotten, and he guessed who the girl was as well, another remnant of the past that the process would be grateful to him to get its vile, slobbering foot-jaws around. Her name was Ace, and her appearance came too soon after the disturbance in the haunted sector to be a coincidence. And the finger on the fallen hand. It wasn't accusing him at all. He had been foolish to imagine that. It was singling him out as a chosen one, the something special he had always known that he was. He chewed on a biscuit and smiled. The process was soon going to have trouble, and no one else could extricate the monster. The biscuit bored him, so he crumbled the rest over the side of the parapet, just making sure the other phasals didn't find it. He shinned down a sloping ridge to the ground and followed the tracks in the dust along the alley. The chittering of the guards inside the building was relentless, but there were no more cries from the phasals. Without him, the process would assert its law by brutality. So let's see how far that got it before things or people got broken. When he reached the sloping marble of the dial square, he stood puzzled for a moment. The silvered tracks led back towards the haunted sector. Vale cursed angrily and faltered at the street mouth. It was the one place he did not want to go. "They're not following," said Ace. Shonzi glanced behind them. "They're busy." She leant against the doorway. Across the street, the opposite wall was painted with moonlit storm clouds. "Can we stop a minute? Are you going to help me find the Doctor or not?" Shonzi looked uneasy and mumbled, "We can't stop here." "I'm not moving until you tell me." "It isn't easy," he said. "I want to know, Shonzi. Did you speak to him? Where was he going?" Shonzi grinned. He pulled off the battered grey straw hat and offered it to her. "The daft old goik gave me this." She stared at the hat. It had been in front of her all this time and she hadn't recognised it. Its brim was coming apart, its crown was full of holes, and its patterned band was gone. But it was the doctor's hat, the hat that he used to tumble up his arm like a juggler. She took it gently in her hands, weighed it for a moment, and then passed it quickly back. She was choked. "You'd better hang on to it. He'd be glad to see it being used," she said. She kicked aimlessly at the dust. The city loomed vertiginously all around, ready to topple in. Nothing ever seemed to change wherever you were. The twilight never changed, the air never moved. It was just grey. Miervra. That was the word she wanted. A word she'd picked up from an Orkulqui sorbet slurp rep on Iceworld. It had no Earth equivalent, but its meaning was clear. No weather. Staleness. No change. Like a tomb. She took a swig of water from his canteen. "How long have you been here?" she said. "We don't know. There's only now here. You'll see." "But you've seen me before." She was desperate, almost in tears. "I've only just got here." With a look of anger he planted the hat back on his head. "Oh, don't start crying. That's typical, just like the others." He turned away in disgust from her. She boiled over. Her hand went into a fist and she hit him hard on the back of the neck. Then she ran blind away from him. Down the rubble-strewn arcade she belted, until she faced the great stone hand in the atrium. "Doctor, I need you!" she yelled, and it echoed back and forth around her. In the starlight, the remaining finger on the hollow hand pointed towards a dark passage at the back of the area. "Ace!" Shonzi was calling after her from the entrance. "Come back! It's not safe down there!" A silver shape lay across the passage mouth. When it saw it had Ace's attention, it rolled over, paddling its paws in the air. It was still unreal, too glossy and smooth like living liquid. Ace moved towards it, but the cat rose and darted into the shadows. Ace followed. Tiny flames flared in alcoves along the passage walls as it passed, like moving through stars. Deeper and deeper. It paused for a moment, waiting for Ace to catch up. Then it darted away, and all the flames guttered and went out. Ace was alone in the darkness. The ground began to tremble, and then with a growing roar, to rock. Ace was flung sideways against a wall and down to the floor. Once more she heard the murderous scream of agony and rage. It was the cry she had heard in the TARDIS as the monstrous invader had struggled to breach the console room doors. Ahead of her, a light was growing. Harsh and glutinous, it filled the end of the passage like a cold white sun. Out of its glare came a dark figure. The shape was silhouetted, gliding closer and closer in long, heavy robes. A wide, circular collar rested on its shoulders, rising high to hide its features. The ground shook as the spectre drew nearer. The walls creaked ominously, like the diaphragm of some aged creature at its last breath. The figure loomed above her, its arm outstretched. The alcove flames hissed upwards, and Ace gasped in shock. The light caught on the sepulchral features of the apparition, eyes staring like one possessed, skin gaunt and shimmering in the glare. It was the ghost of the Doctor.